There was like really interesting conversations Nova and I would have where I just would ask questions, like, what does it feel like to have a seizure? And, she said there's many different answers because all seizures are not the same. And mainly, I wanted to know if she was like sentient and aware, during these times, because sometimes I would be screaming hysterically to call the ambulance.
She's an acclaimed actress, writer, and director. But for Lake Bell, some of her most important work has been as a mom, learning how to navigate her daughter's epilepsy diagnosis. What has she discovered about epilepsy that most people don't know? How does language, like calling seizures brain sparkles, change the way we see difference? That's straight ahead on episode 285. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris, and this is the Neurodiversity Podcast.
What is neurodiversity?
You see the world differently.
Autism spectrum.
Gifted.
Complexities that are inherently inside.
ADHD.
Dysgraphia.
Tourette's.
All brains are different.
You are exactly what this world needs.
This is the
Neurodiversity
Podcast.
So if you're listening to this right as it's released, you should know that next Tuesday is the night. We are hosting our annual Creating Neurodiversity Affirming Schools live webinar event for educators. It's happening September 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and it's free, but you've got to register to save your spot. If you can't attend live, we'll send the recording your way, but again, you have to register to get that link. And whether you attend live or watch the recording, you'll get a certificate of completion for your records. Amanda Morin and I will be joined by Dr. Emily King and Tim Villegas for a 90-minute panel that's all about what this work looks like in real classrooms with real kids. If you've been meaning to sign up, now's the time. You'll have a chance to connect with the other attendees and ask the panel your questions. Don't let it slip by. You'll walk away with new ideas, new connections, and the reminder that you're not in this alone. You can click the link in the show notes or head on over to neurodiversity.university to sign up. Okay, Lake Bell is with me in just a minute.
When I found the Neurodiversity Podcast, I was really kind of
desperate to learn about myself and understand myself.
Honestly, I wanted to find like a
tribe who I could relate to and feel like I fit in.
This podcast brings on guests who seem to be moving neurodiversity more
into the mainstream. And Emily Kircher-Morris is amazing.
I feel like she's talking straight to me.
Her knowledge about people who think differently is so refreshing. Everyone's different.
And the world needs to
understand them. And that's what the Neurodiversity
Podcast is doing.
Helping them understand
us.
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 Today, I'm joined by Lake Bell. Lake is an award-winning actress, writer, and director, celebrated for her feature films In a World and I Do Until I Don't, her HBO work, and her directing award for Pam and Tommy. But today, we are here to talk about something different. Her debut picture book, All About Brains, a book about people, which was released back in April. This book celebrates neurodiversity through the story of Nova, a young girl who shares her epilepsy and her brain sparkles with her classmates. The book was inspired by a real moment based on Lake's daughter Nova's experiences. Lake wrote the book to create an honest entry point for conversations about neurodivergence, not only as a parent, but also from her own experiences as a dyslexic. Lake, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
I think it's really important to start this conversation and recognize that it really is grounded in your own experience, not just as an advocate, but also as a mother. And I want to just go back to the beginning a little bit and ask you about Nova's epilepsy diagnosis and how that came about and what that time was like for you and your family.
Yeah, I mean, it's, first of all, I think that, oftentimes, even in my childhood, I had dyslexia. Okay. So I start even there because I think it helped me understand that the brain is going to have its own path and it's going to be this tremendous amorphous relationship that I'm going to have with it in my life. And that the movement and the shape and the architecture of the brain from an early age I understood is, something to be respected and also humbling. So Nova was about 1.5 when she had her first febrile seizure. That was, we were told, something that she could really grow out of and to not really be alarmed. Many kids actually have febrile seizures, fever seizure, fancy word for fever, right? And they said, well, when she turns 6, get ready to open up the Prosecco because that'll be the day that she'll be done with her febrile seizures because, boy, are those stressful. Anytime there's like a bug going around at the preschool, you think, oh, God, other people are like, I just send my kid to school when they're sick because, it's just they're building their immunity. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, if my kid gets a spike in fever, we're going to have a big fancy grand mal seizure. So we got used to kind of being in this like state of alert for the fever seizures. And then at 5 years old, she had her first grand mal seizure without a fever. And we knew that in that one moment, we went from like, there's a 30% chance she's going to get epilepsy to you have epilepsy, she has epilepsy and here we go. So I just remember my ex-husband and I, who we are really tight and close friends and forever family, as we call it, and largely in part because we've gone through so many trenches together with our children and come out of them and then are still in them, so it felt like we just needed to be allies, regardless of like whatever things we had going on. So we work hard at that as well. But Nova was really, from that point on, I think that seizures have been formative for her in terms of her identity and how she navigates the world. It also, I know a lot of parents who have kids who have had pediatric epilepsy or have it also get this other kind of fun mystery bag of other neurodiversities that join in to the party, as it were. And Nova is no different. So she has to navigate and build tools to adjust to the way that the world functions when her brain doesn't function in the same way that the majority of the people around her do.
For listeners who might not be as familiar, can you share a little bit about what that diagnosis really means and any common misunderstandings that you wish more people would have awareness of?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so epilepsy, it is kind of like people kind of get nervous. They hear, oh, she has epilepsy. What do you mean? And it just means she has seizures. So if you have one seizure, guess what? You can be part of the epilepsy club. You join in. Seizure disorders come in all shapes and forms, and I have a great respect for the brain. I think the biggest takeaway that I've learned from, because my son was hypoxic at birth, so he does not have epilepsy, but I've spoken to so many neurologists over the years, and pediatric neurologists particularly, that I think when I say humbling, I mean, it's the only organ we have that doesn't have this rigid, clear roadmap. The heart, we understand the shape and architecture and the function and how it moves and how it needs to move in order to be successful. Whilst the brain is, can constantly stump neurologists through their career. So I think epilepsy is just a fancy word for seizure disorder. People often get really nervous about it because seizures can be big, bad, and scary, right? But ostensibly, the seizure itself is not the baddie. There's no real bad guys in this. The seizure, it doesn't hurt the brain when it's occurring. So it is a convulsion, but it's not actually zapping it so much that now it's all burned. It's not like that. It looks like, frankly, an electrical malfunction, and that's kind of what it is. I mean, in layman's terms, right? It's just kind of an electric misfire, and we are comprised of electrical charges. Without being a scientist myself, I can just understand from looking at my daughter having a seizure, it looks sometimes like a robot is short-circuiting. So and and seizures come in all forms. So some seizures are as simple as just kind of spacing out, absent seizures, where you just kind of stare for a beat, turn off, come back, and that's it. And you're thinking, well, that feels very doable, but it can get into the way of learning and whatnot. Then there's my daughter also would have myoclonic seizures, which are almost like stutters, little stutter blips in the electrical movement of her thoughts. So she would just a little like that, or as small as, and when we're logging seizures, which you do just to see how many a day, sometimes it's 16, sometimes it's 4, you just don't know. But usually when there's a cluster of a lot of them, we would notice that then a big one would come. And the big one is the I think of it as like the grand finale in the fireworks display, where they convulse and almost like the whole systems turn off of the body and they fall to the ground. And it's less about, once again, the actual seizure. It's more, where are they when they fall?
Mm-hmm.
Were they eating? Are they in the water? That's a real concern. So it's where and how did they fall? But the seizure itself is not if it went beyond 4 minutes, then we need to stop it. But Nova's would never go beyond 2. I think 2 minutes was the longest, maybe a minute and a half.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I reflect back. So you mentioned being in the water. I was a swim lesson instructor when I was a teenager and a lifeguard. And we had kids with a variety of different needs who we did basically one-on-one lessons with. And I had a child who was epileptic and did have a seizure while we were in our swim lesson. And I had been kind of warned about it, but I didn't really know what I was looking for.
It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it was super interesting and scary. And it was fine. I mean, I was right there with her.
Yeah.
And then as an educator, when I taught in the classroom, I had a student who had those absent seizures.
Right.
That communication piece just with the parents and kind of watching. And I don't know that I was always catching when, those things were happening because they were so subtle.
Yeah.
That child was in elementary school. I don't even know that he always even noticed when it was happening.
If they're that young, yeah, it's later on when I think that they notice, hey, this is different than other people. Like, it's not just spacing out. It's almost like I can't hear anything. I remember there was like really interesting conversations Nova and I would have where I just would ask questions, like, what does it feel like
Mm-hmm.
to have a seizure? And, she said there's many different answers because all seizures are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And mainly, I wanted to know if she was like sentient and aware, during these times, because sometimes I would be screaming hysterically to call the ambulance or early on,
Mm-hmm.
Once she said, yeah, sometimes I can hear you, I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to adjust my my techniques in wrangling aid. So yeah, that was really interesting. So I remember there was one. There's one that I'll always remember because the doctor said, "Hey, could you record one of the seizures so that I can kind of see where it's showing up?" Because hers would come kind of to the mouth a lot. So she'd be convulsing, but the mouth was key in the movements. And so I was like, I will certainly try, but in those moments, it's more about, seizure safety, which is making sure that they get to a comfortable place, that they are on their side. That's just like hot tip.
Mm-hmm.
And that their air passage is clear. So you're just like, it's not like you have to by the way, don't put a wallet in anybody's mouth. I mean, it's more just about getting them on their side and the air passageway, which is, often our necks are kind of craned back or craned forward. You want to get it straight.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing you really have to do. There was this one time she was in my closet, and we were going through things. She was looking at some of my fancy clothes and like, oh, I want to try this, And she looked at me, which is unusual, I think, for a grand mal seizure, for her to like have the cue.
Mm-hmm.
So she almost like looked at me with a little fear, a lot of fear in her eyes. And she started to start the convulsion. And I was like, this was my big acting moment where I was like, okay, she can hear you. You're cool.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, are you having a seizure? Yeah, let me hold you. And I calmly took her. She started to seize. I then was calm enough because she had told me that she can hear me. I said, you're doing great. It's going to be done soon. I'm right here. You're doing great. And I took my phone out and I recorded. So for the doctor, I was like, wow, I'm being so organized right now. And then she got through it, and I think that this was during a time where we're not calling the ambulance for every seizure, because I think initially we just thought, oh my God, we need to get the EMS here. And this is very dramatic, And when we're out and about, when there was like, we're on a hike and, one of Nova's triggers was looking at glittery water. So, how look how beautiful, the glitter on the water and how the sun is kind of kissing each wave that's licking by. And you're like, this is, for me, that would just be hyper stressful instead of, I'm like, here, let's look at these rocks,
Yeah.
There was one time when she was in the stream and there's glittery water. And I don't know if I flew, but I don't know how I got from A to B.
Yeah.
To protect her head from falling against a boulder. I just remember I caught it. I don't know how.
Yeah.
But boy, you always wear. The thing is about parents who have kids with epilepsy, you're always in sneakers. You're in a trouser that has a jean that has a back pocket for your phone for emergencies. Those are the two things that are kind of essential. Like you have to be able to run, sprint, fly, and then also just be comfortable because you might have to go to the hospital.
It's a lot. And I feel like it is something that is just so foreign for so many people, not knowing all of that. But, it kind of brings to the process of writing this book.
Yes.
And framing it for Nova. And I like how you're talking about how you frame it for yourself, for how you support her. But then this whole book is also about how Nova kind of understands and experiences this piece of neurodivergence. And so you describe her seizures as brain sparkles in the book. Can you talk a little bit about that choice? And I guess in my mind, I just feel like it's such a good way in general to help destigmatize epilepsy and having a brain that functions a little bit differently. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
When initially, Nova was kind of having this experience, it was COVID. So when it really started to amp up, and thank God that, the silver lining is that we were just there with her. We weren't sending her to school. We were able to monitor her, but it was extremely stressful for the family to feel like, gosh, let's not call EMS if we don't have to, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, She once had a seizure, we were in the middle of it. And in general, we'd have to keep track of the seizures. So that was one thing. And Dad and I, Scott and I were trying to explain that we are working hard to figure these out. And it's, boy, is it confounding. And, how extraordinary the brain is. But then also, we're trying to get rid of them for you, right? We're trying all these medications. And by the way, any parent with kids with neurodiversity know, and by the way, adults too, the experience of trying to find the right damn medication is almost as worse as the condition itself, because you're now putting these very serious pharmaceuticals into your child or into yourself. And there are side effects that are big, bad, and scary, and big girl side effects, And for a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, the majority of the side effects are unacceptable. And you go through each medication and you try to figure out which medication can get the job done without unacceptable side effects, i.e. rage and suicidal ideation. Okay. There we were. And we were all, as a family, trying to figure this out. And she could feel the energy that the enemy kind of was the seizures in the house. And so she had a seizure, and then she told me for the log, and she goes, "Sorry, Mama." Like, sorry, I had a seizure. Started apologizing. We were like, wait, hang on. We got to flip the script here. We need to reframe. And I was like, this is not right. So Scott and I regrouped, and I started doing some research about what notable figures in history have had seizure disorders. And I fell upon a myriad of people. But then one was Joan of Arc. And Joan of Arc at the time was in Frozen 2. There's a reference to Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
So she kind of knew who that was. So I took her aside and I was like, hey, this is crazy. I just wanted to tell you something. Just a little like inside information. And she was like, what? And so I was like, so Joan of Arc, the young girl warrior who got to wear these extraordinary armor and had a horse and wielded a sword and like protected her people and was so brave beyond her years. So she had epilepsy. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, isn't that crazy? So I just wanted to let you know that like some of the smartest thinkers and writers, authors, leaders, I obviously didn't talk about like Joan of Arc burning at the stake. I just went straight to the good stuff because it was also like Napoleon and like Edgar Allan Poe. I was like, oh God. But I was like, great minds have epilepsy, had it. And so it just means that your brain is so smart, so teeming with energy and sparkly magic, and it's electric. And so when it's just, it's bubbling, then there's a schism. And sometimes it malfunctions and it does a misfire. And that's what that is. So when you have those seizures, let me know because I'm so excited that you're going to be firing in this sparkly magic place. And she was like, oh my God, brain sparkles, so that was the brain sparkle moment. And so she was like, wow. So then the next time she was like, Mom, I had a seizure. And I was like, okay, I see you, girl. Let me write it down. Are you feeling smart right now? Yeah, I can tell. And so it became this real reframe of her intelligence and her sort of vivaciousness and her sparkly self.
Yeah.
And so then when she ended up doing a share, this actually happened, and this happens in the book. She had a share on Zoom school during COVID, and you were allowed to share an experience or a thing, no toys, but whatever. People were, my lizard farts, and I just wanted to say, and then the next person would be like, my dad got laid off, or whatever. And then I looked at Nova and I was like, hey, do you want to get an advocacy or an education badge? Because basically the Epilepsy Foundation give you these really groovy pins that you can collect for advocacy or education. So she was like, oh, do you want to share about your sparkles? And so she very bravely went, I have a share. And they were like, great, what is it, Nova? And she was like, I have epilepsy. And everyone was like, of course, the kids were like, what's that? That word is not a word I've heard before. She was like, well, it causes seizures. It's like sparkles in my brain that causes seizures. So this is like her conversation. She's holding court, and the teacher very wisely, thank God, just was quiet and let it happen in this really organic way, peer to peer, talking about really sophisticated things. And Nova explained, about seizures, because kids were like, well, what's that word? What's a seizure? And she was like, well, it's when my body, shakes, and sometimes I fall, and, they're like, God, that sounds scary. She's like, it is scary sometimes, and it was just so honest. And I thought, gosh, it would be so great if, I was thinking about the education that the kids in the share day were getting, which is just like, they know Nova. They know that she doesn't really seem different than them, but that she has a very serious condition. And, if they ever see her seize or stutter seize, it's like they now have this understanding. And I think that leveling and that sort of invitation for the conversation was what I wanted to do with the book. And I take it on with other neurodiversities as well, along with research and connection with this awesome woman named Dr. Maureen Dune. And I think that was important because I just wanted to corroborate, and make sure that these things lined up. And the cool thing is that when now I read this book to kids in schools, when you're reading the book, each little section, which traverses different territory and different neurological differences, kids really relate to it. Even if you're talking about autism and someone's like, hey, I have autism. I often, when I'm reading, someone says, that's why I wear these headphones, or someone says, well, I don't have autism, but I relate to that. I kind of do that sometimes, or, it just allows for there to be this sense of those words seem kind of unusual and different and almost scary, but they're really just fancy words for things that are helping frame what people's experiences are. And for kids, I think that I really wanted these conversations to start earlier. It would have been helpful, I think, for all our community who do have children with neurodiversities, that felt like a generous offering and something that I would have wanted, and certainly Nova would have,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I think a lot of the work that I do, and I think honestly a lot of the people who listen to this podcast, it really is about just normalizing. And the label is not the part that we need to be worried about. And how do we, the label can help us then navigate the world and find these different ways to approach things.
The label is hard.
Yeah.
The label's hard. It's really interesting you bringing that up. I think that especially now there's like, well, everybody says they have ADHD. I think it's language to help understand and assist.
Right.
And to find tools.
Right. It's shorthand.
Yeah, it's just a shorthand. But, I do think it's interesting as Nova is now approaching adolescence. And I just want to say, Nova is currently seizure-free. She has titrated off of her meds.
Wow.
And it has been 3 years.
Okay.
So because she has a genetic mutation, she still has epilepsy, right? Like it's a part of the fabric and the tapestry of who she is genetically. So we are always aware. You can't I still don't open the Prosecco, as it were. But I think that she gets to swim and go to camp and swim and ride horses. And I let her do all, like, we're not in that place of fear. I mean, I think I understand that as a parent, you think, oh, how can I control everything? And I think the biggest learning curve for me is trying to take even the ego of I can fix it and only I can fix it and I am responsible for this.
Right.
That's already innately there. I think that trying to allow her to have her own experience and to trust that I can't fix everything,
right.
And I can't be there all the time.
Yeah. She's got to be able to live her life.
She has to live her life. Exactly. And it's like, she seizes, okay, we're back in. Let's figure this out. And we will always be this like beacon of support and love. And, I think now dealing with ADHD and anxiety disorder and depression is really interesting. Again, those are words to help frame how she's kind of moving through life, because at such a young age, she's turning 11, you start to go, all right, well, okay, her experience and her chemical experience in her body is changing. How can I best support in these times? Because it's definitely where I'm in a new world with her right now.
Yeah.
So.
I want to ask one other question here. It's a little bit off, well, it's not off topic, but it's a little bit different. But I'm just wondering about your experience in the entertainment industry. Do you run into a lot of resistance or misconceptions about neurodiversity broadly? Or do you feel like there's some shifting that's happening? Is there a lot of ableism? What are some of the things that you're noticing there?
Well, I'll tell you directly. When you are a part of the epilepsy community, you do find out other people, within any of your work, right? If you worked at a company, why people would start connecting. And in my industry, I have found that there are well-known performers that have epilepsy, but but choose not to talk about it publicly.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's under control and because there is a stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Other people who have family members who have epilepsy but do not talk about it. And it's interesting. I actually don't fully get it.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that there is this ableist kind of mentality. Epilepsy, though, seizure disorders, it's like, it's controllable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're walking around and doing your life, it's controllable and it's insurable,
Mm-hmm.
as it were. And it caused me pause. I just kind of can't judge anyone else's experience. You know what I mean? It's like their choice to kind of come out, as it were. I think making this book and kind of talking about Nova's condition, I would only do it if she felt comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And she's been such a great young advocate for epilepsy and for epileptics. And she also has a lot of identity in it. And I think that reframing moment was integral to that. I think there would have been shame otherwise,
Yeah.
And ADHD is now the thing that she really connects with because it does affect, and I think like a lot of epileptic children.
I think you're right. Yeah, there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, and I can only imagine like in such young years of development too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a scientist, but I just like she got so much neurological activity that if we are left with this thing that she has to handle and adjust and learn tools for, then so be it. And anxiety is pretty major for kids who have had epilepsy. You can really understand why. You're developing thoughts and ideas and learning about the world. And then right when you want to say, you don't know when you're going to get zapped. And it's going to happen probably 11 times today. Can't tell you when. Like, that's a high anxiety situation.
Yeah.
So, we are learning about medications and things like that to assist her.
Yep.
Because it's just untenable sometimes. But I think, in my industry, I try really hard to, I just did this movie for Miles Levin, who he's epileptic filmmaker, and he wrote a short film that called Under the Lights. That was really great at Tribeca. And then he was his dream to do a feature. And so I'm in it, as well as the kid that was the boy in the short film, Nick Offerman and Mark Duplass, who are all really close friends of mine, supported him in his dream. And my friends are so supportive of Nova and, really understand that they've learned a lot too in my community about epilepsy. I just wrote a piece that actually has epilepsy in it. It's like, I think that the more we see it, and the more we understand that seizures are this thing that show you how powerful your brain is. How, because you sit there and you go, oh my God, why am I like this? Why can't I, concentrate on X, Y, and Z? Or why are these intruding thoughts happening? It's like your brain is this mission control that has this power like no other organ, and it's where our art comes from. I always tell Nova, I'm like, all that anxiety and that pain, that's poetry. I'm like, you're an artist, like take to the pen.
Yeah, I love that. I have one last question, a quickie, as we wrap up here. But if you were talking directly to a young neurodivergent person who's listening right now, maybe someone who's unsure about how or if they want to share their story, what is it that you would say to them? Is there a message that you would want them to hear?
You're a unicorn, okay? And you're in a sea of horses. So, just because you have this big, beautiful, sparkling horn, that's your superpower. And that's what makes you you. So the universe and the world and all these other outside forces are going to be hard in other ways. So be kind to yourself. because that you can control. And your neurodiversity is unique, and yet you're not alone. So know that you are in great company. I mean, some of the most extraordinary artists and thinkers and leaders and visionaries have been blessed with neurodiversity. So go forth and go strong.
I love that. Lake Bell, author of All About Brains, a book about people. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
Thanks for having me.
Lake has built a career in front of cameras and behind them. But what resonated most today wasn't a performance. It was her willingness to share her family's real story. Letting people into Nova's journey takes courage, and it shifts the way all of us think about epilepsy and neurodivergence. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do isn't to create fiction, but to tell the truth of our own lives. Part of that truth is the reality that parenting a neurodivergent child changes you. It asks you to become a learner again, to pick up new vocabulary, set aside old assumptions, and discover fresh ways of seeing your child. Lake's openness is a reminder that we don't have to have all the answers. What matters most is staying curious, compassionate, and being willing to grow right alongside our kids. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris. I'll see you next time on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
Thank you again to Lake Bell. We have more info about her in the show notes. One of Lake's credits is voicing a character on Phineas and Ferb. And being a huge Phineas and Ferb fan, our youngest son was pretty impressed when he found out she would be on the podcast. And if that raises our stature even a little bit with him, very cool. Our host is Emily Kircher-Morris. Corey Orrick is our office manager and production assistant. I'm the executive producer, Dave Morris. For all of us here, thank you so much. See you next time. This is a service of the Neurodiversity Alliance.